back. The Driveline Academy podcast. I'm your host, Devin Morgan, Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy. What's the other stuff I typically say?
You didn't do the Vince Scully intro.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. We are not on the beautiful shores of sunny California. We are still broadcasting live from almost underwater, because that's the way that I like to walk into the spring, is just have the Pacific Northwest just give me like a giant middle finger and be like, hey, 45 years of dealing with this weather, let's make it worse.
Yeah.
Let's make your games in March and April basically unplayable. So yeah, it's the Driveline Academy podcast, joined as per usual by my partner, by my friend, by my assistant director, Jeremy Techtiel. So let's start with some good news. Because
I like good news.
We didn't talk about this, I think, the last pod with Holly, right? We didn't talk about the start of league play for some of our teams.
No.
So, third season of the Academy, right? And I think when we started, there were some people that felt a very specific way about what we were going to try to do running teams, doing the drive line, right? Like, because it's just a different thing. It's a very different thing to bring kids up in this player development ecosystem. It's a very different thing to be responsible not only for like the skill development, but also like teaching kids to play functional baseball, right? And like it's never a problem that Dryland has had to solve before. And I would be the first to admit that like the first year, we were lacking in some of that stuff and systems to be able to build that. I think that same thing is true in year two, where we had some coaches who are really good, that did a good job of addressing that stuff. I'm not sure we had an adequate system to kind of solve for some guys and girls who might still be building that part of it up. Small sample size disclaimer, but we started league play with our 14U and 13U teams. And again, for anybody,
three of our 6 teams.
Yeah, for three of our 6 teams at that age, right?
And, have now played their first games. We still have the other 3 will play this weekend.
Yeah. And for any of our new podcast listeners, because we've had a lot of people joining in the last few weeks, which is tight. Thank you guys for checking this out. We started training in October, and we finally got to like early April, and we're just now playing our first games.
Right.
If I remember correctly,
first.
Yes.
Yeah.
First,
which is like part of this conversation, right?
Yeah.
First games with umpires and a score being sent to someone to say this game was played, as opposed to just like a scrimmage against an in-house team or a scrimmage against like a team wearing different laundry. But
yeah. And I almost said real games, but I'm not going to do that, because the whole point of what we've talked about on here all the time is like not drawing that arbitrary line in the sand, and just be constantly competing in training, competing in scrimmages, and competing in what you could call regulation games.
Right.
In our regulation games, small sample size disclaimer, I'm aware, but we're like plus 28 in run differential.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
4-2 with a plus 28.
Yeah, and around that, one of the things that we're seeing is that we're able to kind of, I think, put some kids on the mound who might have a blow-up inning or two, right? But that's just, it's not the end of the world. Like we're still teaching and learning even in competition, right? Like, so that plus 28, I think if we had managed it differently and like only pitched the kids that we were like really, really confident that would fill up the strike zone, I think that number is even higher, because we're not living and dying by even the 4-2 record, right? We're not living and dying by that. It affords us the opportunity to give kids who are still learning how to get good at moving fast and giving them opportunities. And like what we talked about last week, specific to the bunting conversation, this is another way that you express trust, right? It's another way that it's just like a kid can go out there, they're going to compete their tail off. And whether that has to do with like a muddy pitching mound where you can't find any grip with your your lead leg, your bracing foot, which is going to have an impact, whether you are a kid who is like growing into their body and is still learning to get good at moving fast, we're able to do that thing where it's like, man, I trust you. I trust you to go out there and compete as best as you can. And they go do that. And we're not ripping them a new one when they come back to the dugout.
Well, and on the flip side, this one's for you, Jerry. Shout out to a couple of kids on my team for going 4 innings apiece and shove it. Well, I'm sorry, boys. Your cap was 4 innings.
Right.
We're too early in the season to have you go more than 4 innings. The max they had gone before this was 2. I wasn't willing to go more than 2 plus their previous max. Both of them were not thrilled with me that I took them out of the game because they both had more left in the tank, and I know because I've seen them pitch before.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's a conversation. And both situations, I brought in a reliever who did not do great.
Yeah.
And
it's okay.
It's okay.
It's
okay.
Totally, it's okay.
It's okay. That's what happens. Like, I am protecting your arm. I don't care about this game in April.
Right.
I care that you're healthy when you're 17, 18,
right.
And let alone in July. Like, I have hard limits, and I'm just going to, pull you. I don't care how well you're doing. And I think, I can look back and double check, but I think in 5 of the 6 games that our teams played, our opponent had a pitcher throw at least 90 pitches.
Yeah. I think that's right.
In, opening weekend of league play.
Yeah. Data-driven. Our kids, I think I've got all the games. 35 and a half innings, 673 pitches thrown, 16 kids pitched, 42.063 pitches per player. Shout out to Josh Rudd, Alan Jager, Ryan Brownlee, Rob Haney, all the guys that are kind of we're on this thing about this arm care idea, about continuing to try to advance this initiative. Josh has done a great job. We have some cool conversations coming up with some bigwigs in the next week. And we're living it, we're under the same constraints, I think, as everybody else, which is, yes, we're very fortunate to have parents that are bought in on this idea of development. And I think to whatever degree we've been successful about that, it's been because we've been highly consistent at messaging. Mm-hmm. This is why, this is why, this is why, this is why. But then it's easy to say that in December, the moment that your feet get put to the fire is when you actually, put on a uni and a belt, another team that you've never seen before, and now coaches are put in a position where, all right, well, now you have to really go do the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm super proud of the system that we have. I'm super proud of the coaches we have, because I think we're doing it the way that if I could be so bold, I think it should be done.
Yeah.
Which is, you can maintain a commitment to development, you can maintain a commitment to player safety, and you can maintain a commitment to competing your tail off. These things aren't mutually exclusive. I think you can do them. It's just, you might have to burn a couple calories more.
Right.
But yeah, man, I think that's super good news, and I know that a lot of our kids, at least anecdotally, I've heard really good things about some of our 12 and under kids that are playing rec ball. Seasons seem to be going well. Shout out to Oliver, who's in Academy Online, who just got these crazy accolades for everything he's been doing, participating in the remote training program, which is I guess it's kind of good. I said, I said on, I think last week when I kind of reposted, it's just look, man, their stuff works. And I think a lot of times, either through a lens of sarcasm or joking, we do that thing all the time, ball,
right.
That driveline stuff don't work, man. Yeah. But look, man, I'm not going to be shy about us having good results. So good news can be a recurring segment as we talk about stuff that's happening here. We had another showcase kind of article written about Austin, one of our 16-year-old kids that's playing 18U. And in the off season, averaged he added 3 miles an hour of average bat speed, put on 25 pounds of muscle, and the throwing velo is going up too. And he's out there just crushing it in high school ball.
Yep. And Austin works his tail off.
Yep.
But doesn't overwork.
Man, and we got to.
He does exactly what we tell him.
Yeah.
And does it to 110% of his ability, and then he's done.
But the overwork thing, man, there's such a solid thing to bring up here because it's important. And when I think about Austin, I think I put him in the same box as a lot of kids that are just like, they're really driven, you know, and I love the fact that a kid who's driven to that degree comes here.
Because if he doesn't get direction, he's going to try. Maybe go to YouTube or find something and try anything, and it's probably going to lead to him throwing way too much.
Yep.
Or swinging way too much and like having diminished results.
Yep.
And it's hard for someone who is that driven at 16, who like knows that he wants to play college baseball and knows he needs to get better and needs these results, to stop before you feel like you're tired.
Yeah, because which is an issue, because the moment that you continue to like grind away at whatever that recovery period, right? I mean, that's where the gains happen, right? Like I'm not getting stronger under my bench or under a barbell, right? I'm getting stronger when I do a good job of serving my body the things that it needs: nutrition, rest, recovery, and I think there's so many kids out there that like, I think between those ages of like almost like 12 to 16, we're like, we're past the point where it's just this dream about like, I want to play pro ball and I want to play college ball, but I also might want to work at a frozen yogurt shack so I can get all the frozen yogurt I possibly want, right? There are those kids who take that leap and they're just like, they get obsessive about it.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing unless that kid is obsessive without structure and obsessive without guidance. And again, I think your point about YouTube is exactly correct. There's so much information out there for these kids. It's very easy for them to go like, every single day is like a new drill or a new flaw that they're trying to invent.
Right.
And then they do that and they take a bunch of training activity in an environment that gives them no feedback. And like, it's just all sorts of sideways. It couldn't be any more sideways, right? A lot of things are just like, it's not intentional, right? And it's really hard to get better at that.
But a lot of times it sounds good because, add 10 miles an hour to my velo in 4 weeks.
Who doesn't want that?
That sounds great.
Right.
And like, we can add 3 in the next 4 months because you're only 16 and then we can keep building.
Yeah.
Is a much harder message for both kids and parents to grasp, of like the long-term view. Like, here's where you need to be at the end of the day.
Yep.
We got a whole day to get you there. And like, you don't have to make all your gains by 10 a.m. and then just sit for the rest of the day. Like, this is like a slow build process. And that's a really, really difficult message for most, I would say most parents as opposed to most kids. Because parents, I feel like, see another kid, whether it's a neighbor or a kid they used to play with, make a jump. And they don't necessarily know why, right? Like, it could be something biological. It could be a new training program, whatever. They just see it and now, oh, why can't my kid do this?
Of course.
And like, I don't want to wait. I want to just immediately have these results. And it's a much harder message to sell of like, yeah, we're gonna add, but it's not gonna be that quick because we're doing this in a safe way.
Right.
And like, your kid is going to be much better when he hits 15, 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
But it's not like we're gonna make a massive jump when he's 10, 11, 12, whatever. And that was the other point, I think, about the league play starting last week. One of the leads you kind of buried there is 2 of those teams that started last week.
They had a tough year last
year. They had really rough years last
year.
And the kids and the parents bought into the philosophy. And despite records which actually may have looked at the 2 teams combined went 5-51, and that might be like overselling how competitive they were. Like, most games, they really got boat raced, most games.
Yeah.
It was a very long summer for a lot of those kids. And I know that it was a tough decision of whether or not to come back, because that's a really hard thing to like. Sure, I can see metrically that I am throwing harder and hitting the ball harder, but like, we get into games and we're getting boat raced. So like, why do I want to stay here and keep doing these things when I can just go join one of those other programs who like, yeah, they're not going to show me that I'm getting better, but like, I won't get boat raced all summer. And those 2 teams came out and went 3-1, and killed some opponents.
In a a relatively dominant fashion. I don't think it's I'm not I don't want to be unkind to those orgs that we played or the kids that populate those teams, but it's just the truth is the truth, and small sample size or whatever. The issue wasn't the system of player development. I think the issue was the system of executing player development when you have to be responsible for functional team play. Like
for sure.
Yeah.
And I think another part of it is as you get older, biological outliers matter less.
Mm-hmm.
There's a team that ended my team season last year. We already played them this year. And I had conversations with the parents about how, man, it's kind of wild how we closed that gap.
Yeah.
That they killed us last year in that game. And we competed this year.
Yep.
And they were still bigger than we were. But we've closed that gap considerably. And that's all you can do. And when you're at 10, 11, 12, the best teams are just going to have biological outliers.
Yeah.
And there's just unfortunately not secret sauce that you can have against a biological outlier. They're just going to throw harder than you. They're going to hit harder than you. And they're probably going to win that game.
Yeah.
Over time, that goes away. And that is, I totally understand, a really difficult message for a 10, 11, 12U parent to grasp when their kid is getting killed on the fields and we're telling you, just wait. I promise you in a year, 2 years, your kids are going to be better than these kids because they're not developing.
Yeah.
They were biological outliers and they're resting on the laurels of being a biological outlier. They're not going to get significantly better, and your kid is. They're throwing 70 as a 12-year-old. Maybe they're throwing 75 as a 14-year-old, and your kid will be throwing 75 as a 14-year-old.
Right.
And that's how we close the gap. But we don't get there without patience and understanding that it's going to come with some defeats. And I don't think most of our teams will be non-competitive, but we're going to lose a good amount of games to teams that are bigger than we are and prioritize different things than we do.
Sure.
And that's something we're comfortable with. But that I totally get how that's a hard message for a 10, 11, 12U parent when they see all these other teams playing games every weekend because that's what they feel like they need to do. And we're achieving gains in here.
Right.
And that's those are two very different things. And that's a hard square to circle.
Yeah. I mean, the non-linear biological growth and development thing as a parent is incredibly frustrating because you just want to see your kid be successful, but to a degree, if you don't have a system that's going to develop, then you are at the mercy of that thing.
Right.
And that's if one of my kids needs help, I'll find him a tutor in school, right? I'll reach out to the teacher if that's appropriate, or we'll just kind of take it upon ourselves and find a way to solve that problem, right? Ecological dynamics of skill acquisition is a much more difficult problem to solve than does my child have a functional grasp of basic algebra, right? It's messy. It's really difficult and it's messy. And because it's your kid, what parent isn't going to go to the ends of their earth to try to solve that thing? And the issue isn't the impetus. The issue is the execution or lack thereof, which is just I really hope that, either a hyper optimization for an incredibly specific game environment that is not evergreen is going to play, or I think to a degree, some of what we talked about, last time on the pod about bunting and this pigeonhole thing is very much, it's the same deal. I know there's some teammates of kids that we have that are playing high school ball right now that I've known since they were T-ball players. And look, I've talked about this thing for a long time. If you don't have an eye towards what 90-foot baseball is going to demand, when you show up there, you are going to be fundamentally ill-equipped, and it is very much a rude awakening. And there's a kid I know who I knew through rec ball, has been playing baseball since forever. He's probably right around the same size as my son. Over the course of the last 5 years, high degrees of difference in terms of like the approach to development. One, we're just going to play a shit ton of games, man. And we're going to evaluate the effectiveness of what we're doing about whether winning with those games. And then the other thing was like over here, since Danny's been doing the Driveline since January of 2018. Sure as hell, man, like we are trying to go out and win these games as best as possible, but we are maximizing the amount of time we get to develop skill and play a reasonable number of games at the same time.
Yep.
And just like these two kids are now at very, very different places. One kid just got moved from the left-hand side of the field where he couldn't make the play to second base. And that's the thing we talk about all the time. Second base is like, it's like this deserted island where if you can't functionally get the ball in from the outfield or cover enough space or some combination of both of those things, and you don't have the arm to play on the left side of the field, you got one spot out of 9.
Yeah.
And this kid is like literally getting put into that box. And if he doesn't have success there, they're just not going to play him on his high school team. And he's going to be on the team and he's going to be showing up to games, but the coach is just not going to play the kid.
Yeah.
And I understand the box that high school coaches are in, specifically in Washington here, because we get like 10 practices and you have to go try to play games, right? It's a really difficult thing. I understand high school coach wants to keep his job, so he or she is to a degree incentivized to just like not play kids that need development. And once you're playing a crap ton of games, because you only get 10 practices before games start, you don't have practice time to try to solve some of those problems. Right. And it just sucks that I don't think that kid is necessarily an outlier. I think that there are a lot of kids like that. And again, the thing that I will point to is like the data from the Aspen Institute would certainly suggest that this isn't just like Devin using one anecdotal example to create a thing. We're losing like 1.2 kids every year in this transition. Every single flipping year.
The anecdotal is the flip side, where, I know this kid who's really good and all he does is play games. Well, he's probably an outlier. That like he just develops while playing games is probably not a thing that you can hang your hat on.
Most of us are not that lucky. Like we just don't get that genetic golden ticket. I'm sure that Drew Jones played a crap ton of games. Did like a lot of PG showcases.
Yes, I'm sure.
Like and
so did Jackson Holiday.
Right, and somebody can heat check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that those kids were kind of part of that conventional ecosystem of taking really good athletic young kids and playing a crap ton of games and then developing them towards this thing.
But I would be willing to bet a lot of money that with the fathers that both of them have, they both also trained a good amount, and it wasn't just playing games.
That's the thing. That is literally...
there's clearly genetic traits there.
Sure.
But like, yes, they also had some pretty good coaching and training from a very young age with the families they were born into.
Yeah. And to whatever degree Drew Jones and Jackson Holiday did receive a little bit of a biological golden ticket, and they have a highly unique configuration in terms of the person that's probably giving them a lot of primary instruction is a person who's seen it at a higher level than
he knows what matters. They know what matters.
That 99.7% of all people can even dream of. But again, the thing we keep coming back to is like, to your point, those guys understand what it takes. And if you remain kind of intentionally ignorant about what it takes to be competitive as a high school freshman on a 90-foot baseball field, as to what it takes to be a 16 or 17-year-old that's trying to start to think about lining up college playing opportunities. If you are intentionally ignorant of those things, and then you combine that with, like, we're just going to play all these games, you are that person who's Google searching, how do I gain 10 miles an hour throwing velocity?
Too late, right? You're Google searching it when you're like 17, right? And I think it's not even for me necessarily about the intentional ignorance as it is understanding and believing in that philosophy, and also holding beliefs that they should play a ton of games and winning matters more than anything in these two things. Like, we've had a lot of conversations with parents.
Sure.
In regards to this specifically, where look, I love what Driveline does, love the philosophy, but we need to play more games, or we need to focus more on defensive work or pitch sequencing or whatever they want to throw out there. And I read those messages, and it's just very clear that like, okay, there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what the program is that you think you agree with. Because you like, if you boil it down, they really like the arm care and like the health consciousness of Driveline, and the long-term development focus. Well, those two things fly directly in the face of playing a ton of games. Yeah. So you cannot. It's just you can't want both. Yeah. So
it's oil and water,
both, man. And I understand this too, right? Like both come with sacrifices, right? Like if you're gonna do Driveline Academy, you are sacrificing games played, as opposed to neighbors, friends, former teammates, whatever. Like you're going to play less games than them. We're upfront with you about that. We you know that when you sign up for the program. And that's a sacrifice you have to be willing to make. If you aren't willing to make that sacrifice, that's okay. That is totally okay.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you say all the time? Yeah, you're right. We're wrong. We're dumb. Like, right? Go ahead. Like, there's plenty of other programs that are going to emphasize the gameplay, and like, you can go there. If you go there, you're going to have to sacrifice the rest of it.
Right.
Whether it's like arm care or health consciousness or a coach who doesn't scream at kids or any of those things. So you have to decide what are you willing to sacrifice?
Right.
What's your long-term goal for your kid, and which part of that matters most, and which things are you willing to give up? And like, that's like a difficult conversation, and I get it. But that was the thing that stood out to me most about watching those games last weekend, because my team played two of them, so I was only able to watch one of each of the other two games. But the happiness of like, hey, these kids stuck it out. They believed in it. They believed that I know I'm seeing myself get better here, and I know that's going to show up. I know it is. I just have to wait, and I'm being told that like it's going to happen.
Yeah,
it's going to happen. And then to get on the field and not compete, but dominate some teams. Yeah, like the kids and the parents. It was really cool to see that, and they deserve that. And like, I'm not a huge UFC person, but I was watching Saturday night.
You watched the Izzy fight?
I watched the Izzy fight.
Yeah.
Jesus, dude. Whew. But like right after, I almost like clipped what he said and sent it to a bunch of people, because the message was, I hope like everyone can experience the amount of happiness he had, but you can only get to that level if you really want something, and like work really hard for it. And like have a goal and work your butt off to achieve it. That's the only way you can achieve that level of happiness that he had.
Yeah. For anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about, and I guess spoiler alert, if you've been like, you ordered last weekend's UFC pay-per-view, but you're more current on this podcast, it seems like a really unusual construction.
Yeah, because this is going to come out weeks after the fight. So.
But anyways, Israel Adesanya, he was going in trying to reclaim a belt against a guy who he's 0-3 against. 0-1 kickboxing, 0-2 in MMA, or 0-2 in kickboxing, 0-1 in MMA. And Israel Adesanya came up as a guy who was like the next version of Anderson Silva, in terms of someone who is so proficient about a variety of kind of technical approaches to combat sports that he got proficient to the point that he could be creative. Mm-hmm. Which, when you're watching fighting, is like a really interesting thing, because Izzy and Anderson were very similar, and they would just like take shots from places that are very unconventional and get it off. Like Anderson Silva knocking out what's his name, who was on like all the testosterone with a karate front kick to the face. Like nobody does that. So Izzy, lost his belt. Was like, he went from being like the title holder, no one's ever going to beat this guy, to, now he is a little bit old in the tooth, and maybe he actually doesn't hit hard enough to stay competitive, and yada yada. And the funny thing is that, like, if you actually go back and watch Izzy and Pereira's fights earlier, Izzy was winning all those rounds. He won those rounds, but lost the fights. and then comes back and starches him in the second round with just like a brutal left-right combo.
Immediate lights out.
Yeah, man, he turned the switch off.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like, two things. I think we're just explicitly like not grooming a kid for like the 12U NTIS. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing for someone who is. That's your purview. It's your choice. I understand the idea.
Yeah.
But if you listen to actually like I think one of the USA Baseball head coaches was on Ryan Brownlee's ABCA podcast relatively recently. I want to say in the last couple months. And he said, even with USA Baseball, right, making the 12U team, the national team, doesn't mean you're going to make it to 14, and it doesn't mean you're going to make it to 16. And a lot of times they're actually seeing that those kids don't continue. What does that point to, right? It points to all the time you have slices of pie, right? The pie analogy, right? You can spend all of those slices of pie the way that you want. You can't create more. And again, this is just like the opportunity cost of playing all these games is that it inhibits your ability to participate in skill development and recovery to actually like fuel that thing. And that's just a choice, right? Like, I think our choice is a good one. Like, and sure, you can call me a paid shill because I work here, we work here, and we're on a Driveline Academy podcast saying that our choice is the right one. I guess we'll see over the course of the next 5 to 10 years who's right.
Screw that. Prove it. You think you're right? Prove it. I got data. What do you have?
Sure.
A win-loss record? Like, sure. Like, throw that in my face. That's okay. I can take that. I have data to prove that like our kids are individually getting better. So. And
like, man, and again, this is all anecdotal, but it hurts my heart when I like look and see these Facebook groups where there's a parent on there who's like, Johnny, Katie, Jimmy, Jane, they batted, 450 this year. And their high school team is like 21-3, and they're the 3-hole hitter, and I can't understand why I can't find a place for my kid to play college baseball. Ships in the night, man. Like the things that you think are communicating value, and the things that college coaches are looking for, the things that professional coaches are looking for, the two shall never meet. Right? You are not on the same page. And amusingly, I think we've backed our way into the thing that we wanted to talk about today. Which was, I think, let's call this a parallel value of a data-driven approach.
Yeah. And that was part of, I'm pretty good at this. But the Izzy Adesanya thing was ultimately a segue into this.
Right.
Where, like, you have to, like, work hard at things. And, like, it's way more satisfying to take that long-term approach and like set goals, work really hard to achieve them. You get a feeling that like is hard to beat when you achieve that goal.
Yeah.
And then you could be happy for a day or two, and then you reset another goal and keep pushing towards that.
Yeah.
And that does not just apply to like Israel Adesanya is not going to be like, all right, well, I'm good now, right? Like he's going to find another goal to set his attention to.
Right.
And that's where we get into this. We're just like, that's a really important thing to learn in life, even if these kids aren't going to play college or professional baseball.
And to be really clear, this is a very different perspective than the perspective that comes with every weekend is a new Jimmy John's Armistice Day Triple Sapphire Diamond Elite World Series Intergalactic Regional Championship.
It's a good name.
That
trademark.
Yeah, we'll put that on a shirt. Jimmy John's, please don't sue us. It's just a very different perspective. The perspective that those kids are getting when they participate in that ecosystem, when you participate in like this, like, hey, I mean, there's just one team that gets to go home feeling good. is you're defined by outcome. And we aren't ignorant to outcome. That's not it. All we're doing is just going like, to get the best possible outcomes later, here's the plan we need to get there over time, and we are not like hyper optimizing for all these other outcomes that like are truly meaningless along the way. Like that's just it. And I think one of the, again, like the parallel outcome to that perspective is this goal setting test retest thing. And I think about kids that are in our org who, to be clear, are getting way better. Like we have kids who, if we had a commitment to like the kids that are going to give us the most leverage to win games early, right? Kids walk into a tryout or an assessment or whatever, and I think sometimes you see those kids. I can think about a couple kids in our org who, like, if we had a commitment to that, we would just be like, hey, sorry, I don't think this is the place for you.
Oh, 100%.
You're too small, you're too weak, whatever. Although amusingly, one of the kids that I think about, Lucas, for sure small, but like, because we took the time to put him through like a force plate assessment.
Well, he would have been one where like, I think we knew he was a good athlete.
Yeah.
He was obviously small, but I think we knew he was a good athlete, but it was the and this is, COVID has a pretty big hand in this, but he just was super raw in terms of like throwing and hitting skills.
Yeah.
Like, he had not played a whole lot of competitive or non-competitive baseball in his life. And it was like, well, we have an extremely raw skill set where like, we know he's a good athlete. Yeah. We know he is fast, he can produce force, and he wants it. And then you look a year and a half later, and the kid is a monster.
Yep. But like that initial presentation of being small and a little rusty, right? It's one of those things that, like, you have parents, they're like, all right, I got to get Johnny or Katie, we got to get ready for tryouts, right? Because they're trying to resolve, we're trying to resolve those flaws. You can't resolve height, right? You can't.
I've tried. You can't.
Me too.
You could dead hang from your feet. It doesn't work. I've tried.
You can't resolve, like muscle density, right? Yeah. Those are things that they're really difficult to make quick fixes to. So suffice to say, I think we have a decent number of kids in our organization that kind of have presented that way initially. And again, make no bones about it.
That's why we get them.
Well, right.
Because other teams don't see that.
Right. But they're getting a lot better. And I'm not going to close the door on any of these kids getting an opportunity to not only have like a successful, resolved high school 90-foot baseball experience, but to whatever degree the next thing could open up for them. But even if that doesn't happen, we're teaching kids to value their effort over their outcome. Like we're teaching them the benefit of having process and structure. We called this thing an academy for a reason. And like, I remember, Mike and I having this conversation in the old Driveline offices above our warehouse. And what I originally wanted to call it was the Driveline Development Group. Because I thought that like DDG was like a slick, acronym or whatever. And Mike was just like, well, like, you just want to teach these kids, right? It's just an academy. And I was like, yeah, it is. You're right. As Mike often is with things like this.
He doesn't listen to this.
No, Mike. Yeah. Hi, Mike.
Lord business, you're too busy.
It is an incredibly valuable thing, I think, to bundle. We're teaching kids an approach to life, and we're also teaching baseball, right? And I think, and we're certainly not.
And honestly, probably in that order.
Correct. And that's, honestly, I think that's the only way that you can do it and feel, maybe not the only way. It's one way that you can do it and not feel gross about it. Right? I would never, ever have a kid come in and if a parent was like, well, can you get my kid like a D1 scholarship, and they're like, the kid's 12? No, I'm not guaranteeing that. I know someone who's trying to poach one of our players in high school and is promising him that he's developed a bunch of D1 catchers. Well, you haven't. But also, like,
He doesn't listen to the podcast either.
no, 100%. But you can't. These are really difficult things to guarantee, right? First of all, it's really flipping hard.
You're straight up lying.
You're straight up lying, because it's really hard. You can't expand the number of colleges, so basically, like, the number of roster spots is kind of already set. There's still this trailing effect with like COVID and guys getting initial years of eligibility. They're making that even more difficult over the course of like last year, and I think coming into this year, it starts to resolve next year. And beyond that, luck, injury, there's a bunch of stuff that like you cannot control.
Nope.
So offering that as like a guarantee is pretty scummy.
Yes.
I think our position on this thing is like, it's two things. Number one, I want to build you towards a goal, and that goal is a competitive 90-foot baseball player. And Jeremy and I, like, we've talked about it. We promise we are going to do like the data-driven kind of, this is what that actually looks like. I think we can put some numbers to that. And hopefully that's beneficial for you guys to be able to kind of have an idea that like, okay, this is just it's a destination. It's a destination that you can get to and you can work towards progressively if you just kind of acknowledge that it exists, right? So we're going to do that thing. But man, past that, playing college baseball is a luxury that most of us don't get.
And not for nothing, it's not an easy lifestyle.
I
You gotta really goddamn want it.
Yep. Because
And
it's going to define your life. I literally had this parent this conversation with one of our parents in the last week or so, who was like, I don't know if I want my child to play college baseball, even though the child might want to play college baseball, because I'm aware of the sacrifices that's going to entail.
Yeah.
And I, as the parent, might prefer for him to have a more well-rounded college experience, which I think is a totally valid perspective, right? That, like, again, we talked about sacrifices, right? There's stuff you're going to have to give up. But the thing that I said to this parent, and I think the thing that we're kind of driving towards here, is that there is a ton of value in the things you learn as part of this journey, right? I think a lot of guys that I know that were here who played college ball or played pro ball, they understand kind of this process-driven approach, and they understand because they've cultivated also this perspective of perseverance, right? Where like, I know I've got some stuff that I'm going to have to work through. I'm gonna have to get through some shit, right? And sometimes that hard. We talked in our department meeting this morning about a high school kid that we have who did the thing that I did, which is we run into a high school coach and that person might not work for you. And instead of taking that an opportunity to go like, hey, I need to work my way through this, you kind of go like, man, I touched the fire and I don't want to do that anymore. Yeah. So I guess I'm saying that to say that like, it's not that this is a perfect process, but I think the more that we have time with kids in this ecosystem, the better that they understand that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And the better that they can implement it, which is both a baseball thing and a life thing. And to whatever degree, this also prepares you for working in a front office, right? Like working on a college team in an analytics department, right? Like being a volley and like getting on that path. All of those things are in play because you know both. You understand a data-driven approach to player development because you executed it. You have this sense of like perseverance and the ability to kind of work through struggle and difficulty. And during this path of like goal, test, retest, you have all those things. You just need opportunities at that point, you know?
Our 12-year-olds, for the most part, they're 12. So, but I would say a relatively high percentage of them could tell you what the optimal launch angle is for batting average and for slugging percentage.
Yeah.
There are people that coach professional baseball that probably couldn't spit that at you.
not only that, they would dispute the fundamental truth.
That too. But like, that's a thing that isn't lost on me when I hear kids, shout out Mobes, giving lessons to other kids and like passing on what they learned here. You can't teach something if you don't have a really good understanding of it and like a mastery of it. So that lets me know like we're doing it well.
Yeah.
Like we've taught this 14-year-old well enough about the data and the approach and how to use that where he is able to take that, what he has learned, and distill it down for like 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds and be able to pass that on. And that's really cool. And there are like people who work for big league organizations who don't know that or have that information. Give it another 8 years when they're like graduating college, they're going to be very far ahead of where a lot of, if they want to go work in pro ball or be coaches in pro ball, like they're going to be pretty far ahead of where a lot of guys start.
Yep. And if those kids come to hate baseball by the time they're 12, 13, 14, you're never getting that outcome.
Nope.
You're never getting that first of all.
Nope. I think that's my favorite piece of feedback that I hear from parents.
Yeah.
Is that like, either like, my kid never used to want to play catch. Now it's like every damn day my arm hurts. I love that. Like, not that the arm hurts. I always recommend J-bands.
Sure.
And like, dads, you gotta go through your arm care too.
Got onboard, baby.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, you need onboard.
Or like, my kid talks about baseball way more than he used to. Like, just stuff like that. It's like, we, regardless of everything else, like even if that kid got worse, we did something. Yeah. We ignited something there that like is a really cool thing.
And I mean, that's growing the game. Like and I'm pretty sure I've given this exact same rant on a different podcast episode, but like growing the game is actually cultivating kids that love this thing past the point that they're done playing.
Right.
That's it. And that's a very different outcome than kids that walk away from this thing and they're like, I hate it. I hate it. I hated my time. And like the last interaction they have is going to color the entirety of the experience. Mm-hmm. Right. Ran into some parents running errands with my darling wife at Old Navy this weekend. A couple kids that I used to coach, one who was on an academy team, and then one that I coached for a couple years in rec ball. They are now 16 and 15 respectively, or they might both be 16, and they're coaching juniors baseball. They have a parent assistant coach that's like literally helping them, but they're coaching the team.
Yeah.
They weren't the best. They weren't biological outliers. They're kids that walked away from this game and didn't hate it. And you can't tell me that isn't a valuable outcome of of our time that we have with these kids.
Well, the other part of this, I am very confident. Couple years, our kids who have been with the academy for a couple years are graduated, whatever. These are kids that are going to come back and coach for me.
Oh, we're for sure going to hire some of them.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
We're going to have interns. We're going to have
and then
coaches.
It's just like a never-ending population of coaches that I trust the hell out of because I know they've literally started doing this when they were 11 or 12.
Yeah.
And like, there's nobody else that I want working with these kids of a kid that like, hey man, I was small too. I started doing this when I was 11 and 12. I played college baseball.
Right.
Like those are, I used to, when I worked in pro ball, this is like a thing that I could never understand. Which is like not dissimilar from a lot of other youth organizations. And this is what I said basically on the last podcast with like Angels versus Rays. Yeah. We're hey, we're going to put way more attention on our top 5 prospects because like these are like the big money guys.
Yep.
And we're just like not really going to pay attention to anybody else in the org. And like if they end up making it, great. But if not, it is what it is. They were like a 20th round draft pick.
Yeah.
When you could spend resources teaching these 20th round draft picks that like, hey, even if they don't end up making it, they can now immediately retire and become coaches for you. And that's like a really valuable resource that a lot of teams just punt on. And you see the same thing in youth baseball.
And it's so unbelievable because I guess it's not unbelievable. It's just like it's mind melting that people don't see this they don't see it for what it is,
Right.
which is an opportunity to create assets. I see it from the way my heart sees it, which is I want these kids to have a pervasive love of this game that keeps them connected to it in some way, shape, or form. Which I guess to a degree is like the same thing that Rob Manfred wants, right? Like you want a customer. Maybe I'm being too generous, Rob. Sorry. I think people that love this game, not Rob Manfred
Or John Smoltz.
or John Smoltz, would say that like that's the thing we want is we just want people that love it, right? Because the inflection point there is you have people that played it who still love it, who make people, and then they teach them to love it, or they at least get them started. And that's all we can ask for.
I want to build a bunch of goddamn psychopaths who love baseball.
Right.
If they played at a high level, that's even better.
Right.
But like, I want them to fall in love with the sport the way I did. And like, there's so many lessons that you can learn from it, and you learn all of them, but not if you don't like truly embrace it and fall in love with it and like embrace the grind and go through it. And like with the ups and downs, because it's going to come. Like that is at the end of the day, I care way more about kids leaving this academy still loving baseball than kids leaving this academy and going to play college baseball.
Yep.
Both are goals of mine, but like one is going to have a higher priority.
Yep.
Like I love,
and it's also in consideration of the stuff you can control.
Yeah.
Right. Like we can control our behavior as the admins of this program. We can control the way that our coaches teach this thing.
Yep.
To a degree, we can control some of what we tell our parents and the ones that are bought in about why we're doing this thing, right? There are all these things that we can control. I can't control how lucky you can be during that high school at bat where a scout might be in attendance. I can't control that.
Nope.
The system is designed to acknowledge what we have leverage on and the stuff that we don't, and we just hyper optimize for what we put our eggs in the basket of the stuff that we largely can control. So to whatever degree this is beneficial for you, dear listener, who is either running a team or running an org, understand that a lot of this stuff just comes from the perspective of up top. And it drills down, and you're going to find coaches this resonates for, and you're going to find ones that don't. You're going to find parents that this resonates for, and the ones that don't. I think the thing that matters most is the people who are like, I'm interested in that. Those are the ones you got to serve, right? Those are the ones you got to serve and be brutally honest about like, hey, look, again, I'm not optimizing for the 12U NTIS. I'm just not. I don't even think that the 14U NTIS is a thing I'm worried about either.
On the flip side, knowing you not only don't have to, but in a lot of cases shouldn't try to serve the others.
Yeah.
And like,
because it comes with a cost.
And like, you get one parent who says, I love the driveline philosophy, but we just like need to play more games. And then game one of the year, the other team wins by 4 runs because we commit some errors and walk some dudes. Even though like you watch the game and it's clear we're hitting the ball harder and throwing the ball harder. And that parent can sit in the stands and use that anecdotal evidence to say like, I was right. See, now you have a bunch of parents who start to lose the plot a little bit and don't, and that's like a really, really difficult thing that like everybody goes through. And those are parents that like in a perfect world, they are somewhere else because like you don't align with the values, and it's really hard even with like one set of parents that doesn't align with the values that can like have like some really negative downstream effects.
Yeah. Spoil the soup.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like it can make other kids quit. Not their own kid, but other kids quit when they are made to feel at like 11 like they aren't good.
Yeah.
Because in all honesty, most kids don't, and most people don't want to continue doing things they're bad at.
Right.
And especially if I feel like I'm getting better and they're still saying I'm bad when like my coach is telling me I'm getting better. Yeah. And then like all I hear from like maybe teammates or parents in the stands is like, this kid blows the game every time. And then that kid quits. And like we don't get to see what happens when like an 11-year-old who is not very good at baseball sticks with the program for 3 years. What do they look like at 14?
Right.
What do they look like at 17, 18, 21? And like if you don't give these things some time, you're just any other youth baseball program.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just like there's no identity, there's no longitudinal like direction we're trying to move towards. It's just, how the next weekend is like defining my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of anything else we do with our children that revolves around that thing other than sport.
Yeah.
Like it's just sports, and I truly think that like baseball's the thing that I know the best. We suffer this, I think, way more than other sports.
Yeah, it's the length of the season, right? Like we just play more games than any other sport, so like you're gonna have more losses, and you're gonna have more outings where you cannot throw a strike.
Yep, and again, this maps to the data that we have on participant loss, right? Where we lose a truly disproportionate percentage of kids, more so than any other mainstream sport. I understand that it's not easy. I understand that it's not easy, but I think that there's enough information out there, and certainly the Hacking Youth Baseball Development book, or whatever we're going to call this stupid thing, is like the most significant like salvo we can shoot to try to like help people understand in an indirect sense, right? Like we can't open Driveline Academy teams across the nation tomorrow. Maybe we'll get there in a bit. But what we can do is like distribute information about like how to exemplify the approach, right? How to start to think about building systems, how to start to think about the individual layer of this, the team layer of this, the systematic layer of this, that all carries and resonates the same message.
Yep.
I care a hell of a lot more that you are like a baseball psychopath that is emotionally resolved about the time that you have to play this game. And while you're playing, let's aim towards the long-term goal and what that needs to look like. That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
I got a new game for us.
Ooh, let's hear it.
You watch Parks and Rec?
I do. Big fan.
Okay, Johnny Karate.
Yep.
Anybody that doesn't know, Andy, erstwhile shoe polisher, has an opportunity to become Johnny Karate, children's party entertainer.
Yep.
You see where I'm going here?
No.
Okay. So your nephews.
Yes.
You go down there, and they're like, "Hey, party today, and we're gonna have somebody come to entertain the kids." Best MLB guy who would be like, "I'm so excited that this person is gonna come like entertain us at this party." And worst if you've got it.
And you know who my worst is.
No, I know. We gotta find somebody different.
I have a platform, and I'm going to use it, John Smoltz.
My best would be a combo answer.
Okay.
Juan Uribe, Hyunjin Ryu. When those guys were in the Dodgers, it was constant comedy. They had a ton of fun in the dugout, and I think if you gave them like this opportunity to like Laurel and Hardy their way through a kid's birthday party, it would be fun for everyone involved. There's going to be dancing. They're going to be throwing bananas at each other. It's just going to be great, and they don't speak the same language, which makes it even more
funnier,
great.
Yeah.
Like I would be absolutely thrilled.
That's a good one. So like, it's going to be really hard for me to not answer like Brett Phillips for basically every one of these is like, who's the most fun major league player that you could put in any scenario, because it's just probably him.
Yeah. That guy gets it.
Yeah, that guy gets how much joy you need when you do this. But I think like the secondary answer for me there would be Anthony Rizzo.
Oh yeah,
because like all this stuff, obviously he had cancer, and he does a lot with like children's cancer wards and stuff like that. And he always looks like he has the most fun time doing it. Yeah. And like the kids always look like they have the most fun doing it. So I feel like that would be the move. Like
Yeah.
Rizzo rolling up to a party as like Johnny Karate. I think he would have a blast with it.
Oh yeah.
And I think like that would wear like the enthusiasm would get off on the kids. But yeah, the worst. It's you, John. Nobody else.
You know,
Come on the podcast, dude.
when I think about someone who's just like a thief of joy, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Hey kids, let's have a birthday party. 10 minutes later, they're all like crying about like the existentialism of life because he told them at this birthday party that birthdays are actually not meant to be fun. It just means you're getting a year closer to death.
yeah.
And like life is short and you really have to embrace it.
Yeah.
And back in the day,
things were good.
Yeah.
But you, 5 to 7 year old child, you
Right.
missed that layer of opportunity. So
Right.
hey, like things are just gonna suck for you anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and age is just a number. And I don't like numbers. So
No, numbers are bad, dude.
yeah,
I'm out on numbers. I don't know.
I'm gonna find a way to get it in every podcast. I have a platform and I'm gonna use it. Yeah. Please come on the podcast. I'd love to chat.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Talk about your thoughts on youth baseball.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna I have a whole other rant I was gonna start, and it's like, you know what? I want to keep my job for another week.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Johnny Karate.
Johnny Karate, that's a good one.
You because you got to have like a Johnny Karate guy in the clubhouse. Like you gotta,
In my first thought, honestly, when you said like Johnny Karate, because you know he most like yes, yeah, the Johnny Karate Super Show
Yes.
had like a lot of extra parts in it.
Cast.
But like the initial Johnny Karate was just like him with the guitar singing goofy songs.
yeah.
And I immediately jumped to like Bronson Arroyo or Barry Zito because
Get
both of
out
them
my
like
brain, dude. Get out of my brain.
Yeah.
I literally was like, well, who's that guy with the Reds that used
Yeah.
to sing a lot, and he had those kind of like cringy videos. Oh, it's Bronson
This
Arroyo.
was Bronson Arroyo. And Barry Zito was like a pretty
Yeah.
accomplished guitar player too. So like those are the guys I thought of. And like I think honestly, I think Bronson Arroyo is probably the real answer.
Yeah.
Because I think he'd have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
Barry Zito's music's a little bit sadder. But here you want to know if we're bringing music into this.
Yes.
Dark Horse. Country Joe West.
How dare you?
Could you imagine him rolling up to a kid's party, bringing a guitar, and attempting to Johnny Karate a bunch of kids,
Over under on how long he gets into that before he like has a heart attack.
and throws a parent out of the room?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody get
Argues with a kid who tries to like join in singing the song. Yeah,
This is Joe's time.
yeah. This is my show.
This
is
Joe's
my show.
time. Calm down out there. Oh God, Joe West, dude. Yeah, Bronson Arroyo. Was he also the guy that did like some car dealership commercials that were super hilarious? Who am I thinking? I think that was somebody else.
Maybe. I don't know if I saw those.
I'll have to do
I
some
did
Googling.
recently. I think it was like yesterday or 2 days ago. There was an article about Dusty Baker going to
Oh yeah.
a Chili Peppers concert, right?
Yeah, and Flea gave him a shout out from the stage.
Yeah, and they were like, "How do you know Flea?" And he's like, "Oh, Flea and Bronson were friends." And when I used to coach Bronson, it's like, yeah, that tracks. That makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's really tough. It's sad that like there was an era in NBA where there were like a bunch of ball players that wanted to be rappers, and they actually did like an album of
Damian Lillard says that era is not over.
He would, but like this was like like Gary Payton I think was rapping on a song that was produced
Shaq put out an album.
by Ant Banks, who produced a bunch of Too Short stuff. Shaq obviously had a couple of albums. Shout out to my best friend Ian, who was a huge Shaq guy back in the day, and we continue to make fun of him
Like,
for how ridiculous that
just the music, or he was like, I love watching him play basketball.
Had the album.
I had Kazam on VHS when I was a kid, so like, is it different?
Yes, because I never, ever in my life was like, I gotta buy the Shaq CD so I can listen to this in my car.
We listened to it in his car. Okay, all right, yeah.
In the Plymouth Volare that we used to roll around in,
go.
the Plymouth Volare station wagon. I'm telling him my age a little bit. But yeah, I would love to like hear just the raw cringe of like MLB guys trying to rhyme. That would be hilarious and bad.
Next week's segment. Who we could prep for this.
Best worst rappers in the MLB.
Best worst rappers in the current MLB.
Ooh man, all right. I'll have to do some digging. I'll have to dig around.
See if we can find like actual things that they put out, like Greg Olson the tight end when he was at Miami who made that
dude.
ridiculous song that everyone pulled back at.
Yeah, that's a deep cut. All right, ball players and rappers next week. We'll do that. As per usual, thank you guys for tuning in. The numbers the last couple weeks have been kind of crazy, so very much appreciated. Like and subscribe and review and turn on the notification things to help the Borg hive mind understand that you like this thing. So the more people like it, and yeah, we will data-driven competitive high school player next week.
Yep.
We're gonna do that thing. And again, the whole point is if you know where you need to get to, it's a lot easier to reach that destination than just being intentionally or non-intentionally ignorant, trying to win a bunch of, 12U games. Good luck with that.
Correct.
All right. We'll see you guys later.